Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I thought the call from my mother was going to be about Sunday dinner plans. Instead, Patricia's voice carried that familiar tone she used when delivering news she knew would hurt. "Robert, honey, we finalized the European vacation details. 2 weeks in Italy and France, leaving next month." My heart lifted for a moment, thinking about exploring Rome with my family, until her next words shattered everything. "Your sister Amanda mentioned you'd probably be too embarrassed to join us anyway, considering how awkward family trips make you feel." The silence stretched between us as I sat in my office, staring at the financial statements showing exactly how much I'd spent keeping our family afloat for the past 3 years. The phone felt heavy in my hand as I processed what my mother had just said. Amanda thought I'd be embarrassed. I was the one who had been paying their bills, covering emergencies, and ensuring they could maintain the lifestyle they'd grown accustomed to since my consulting business took off. "Mom, what do you mean Amanda thinks I'd be embarrassed? I've never said anything about being uncomfortable on family trips." My voice carried a confusion that I hoped would prompt an explanation that made sense. Patricia's laugh sounded forced, like she was reading from a script someone else had written. "Well, you know how she is. She just thinks you're always so busy with work, and honestly, Robert, we didn't want to burden you with family vacation expenses when you're already doing so much for us." The words hit me wrong. I pulled up my banking app while she continued talking, scrolling through months of transactions that told a different story. Mortgage payment to First National Bank for Mom and Dad's house, $2,400. Amanda's Northwestern University tuition payment, $4,200. Emergency car repair for Dad's truck, $850. Grocery money for Mom when Dad's Social Security came up short, $300. "Mom, since when have I ever complained about family expenses? I literally paid for our last 3 family gatherings, including Amanda's graduation dinner, that cost over $600. The line went quiet except for the sound of Patricia clearing her throat. "Robert, honey, maybe you should talk to Amanda directly. She mentioned some things about how you've been acting lately and, well, we just thought it would be better if this trip was more intimate. Just immediate family." My stomach dropped. "I am immediate family. I'm your son." "Of course you are, sweetheart. But Amanda's going through a difficult time with her studies, and Tyler's been such a support for her. We thought it would be nice to give them a special trip together. Plus, your father's been looking forward to some quality time with just the 4 of us." 4 of us. My parents, my sister, and her boyfriend, Tyler. The boyfriend whose entire lifestyle I'd been inadvertently funding through the money I gave Amanda for her school expenses that apparently covered a lot more than textbooks and meal plans. After hanging up, I sat in my office chair staring out at the Chicago skyline. My consulting firm occupied the 32nd floor of a downtown building, and normally, the view helped me think clearly. But right now, all I could focus on was the growing realization that something was very wrong with this picture. I opened my laptop and began going through my financial records more systematically. The numbers painted a stark picture of exactly how much I'd been contributing to my family's well-being. Over the past 3 years, the total came to $47,312, not including gifts, restaurant bills I'd covered, or the countless times I'd paid for family activities without thinking twice about it. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "Mom said she talked to you about the trip. Hope you understand it's nothing personal. Just need some family bonding time without work stress." Work stress. As if my success was something that created problems for them, rather than solutions. I'd built my consulting business from nothing, working 16-hour days, initially living on ramen noodles and determination, until I landed my first major client. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same work ethic they now called stressful was what enabled them to live comfortably. I decided to do some investigating of my own. Opening Facebook, I searched for any recent posts from family members about vacation plans, What I found made my blood run cold. 3 weeks ago, Amanda had posted a photo of European travel guides with the caption, "Planning the most amazing family trip ever. Cannot wait for 2 weeks in paradise with my favorite people." The post had 17 likes from family, friends, and distant relatives. Several comments asked about details, and Amanda had responded enthusiastically about visiting the Colosseum, touring French vineyards, and making memories that will last forever. 2 weeks before that, my father Douglas had shared an article about budget travel tips for families with his own comment, "Getting ready for our big European adventure. Patricia's been planning this for months." Months. They'd been planning this for months while sitting at dinner tables with me discussing everything except the elaborate vacation they were taking without me. Every family gathering, every casual conversation about summer plans, every moment they'd had the opportunity to mention this trip, they'd chosen silence instead. I scrolled further back and found more evidence. Patricia had liked several posts from a Facebook group called European Travel for Families, dating back 6 months. Douglas had commented on a friend's vacation photos from Rome, mentioning that he'd be seeing it firsthand soon enough. Amanda had shared multiple articles about Italian restaurants and French museums, always with comments about how excited she was for her upcoming adventure. The planning hadn't been last minute or spontaneous. This was a carefully orchestrated family vacation that had specifically excluded me from the very beginning, and they'd all participated in keeping it secret. My phone rang again, Patricia's number appearing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, needing time to process what I'd discovered. When I finally listened to the message, her tone had shifted to something that sounded almost panicked. "Robert, honey, I think we got off on the wrong foot earlier. Why don't you come over for dinner tonight? Dad's making his famous barbecue, and we can talk about everything properly. Amanda will be there too. And I think once we all sit down together, we can work this out. You know how much we love you, sweetheart. Call me back." The message felt like damage control rather than genuine concern. For the first time in 3 years, I wondered if my family's expressions of gratitude and love had been more about maintaining their financial lifeline than actual affection. That evening, instead of going to dinner, I drove past their house. My house technically, since my name was on the mortgage, after I'd helped them avoid foreclosure 2 years earlier. Through the front window, I could see them sitting around the dining room table, eating dinner and laughing together. No empty chair waiting for me. No phone calls to check if I was coming. Just a family enjoying an evening together, completely unburdened by my absence. I parked across the street and watched for 20 minutes, trying to understand how I'd become someone whose exclusion from family events was so easily accepted. The painful truth was starting to emerge. Somewhere along the way, I'd become more valuable to them as a financial resource than as a family member. The next morning, I decided to confront Amanda directly. If she was the source of this embarrassment narrative, I needed to hear it from her own mouth. I drove to her apartment near Northwestern's campus, a place I'd helped her secure by co-signing the lease when her credit wasn't sufficient. Amanda answered the door in pajamas at 11 in the morning, clearly not expecting company. Her expression shifted from surprise to something resembling guilt when she saw me standing in the hallway. "Robert, what are you doing here? I thought you'd be at work. We need to talk about this vacation situation. Can I come in?" She hesitated, glancing back into the apartment, where I could hear Tyler's voice calling from what sounded like the living room. Sure. But Tyler's here and we were kind of in the middle of something." The apartment was nicer than anything I could have afforded at her age. 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, located in one of the safer neighborhoods near campus. I'd helped her get it because Patricia had insisted Amanda needed a good living situation for her mental health and academic success. Tyler emerged from the living room wearing expensive athletic wear that I recognized from high-end sporting goods stores. His casual confidence suggested someone who'd never worried about money, which made sense given what I was learning about how my financial support had been trickling down to fund his lifestyle through Amanda. "Hey, Robert, Amanda mentioned you might be upset about the Europe thing. Tyler's tone carried a dismissive quality that immediately put me on edge. "I'd like to talk to my sister privately, if you don't mind." Amanda shook her head quickly. "No, it's fine. Tyler can stay. We don't have secrets from each other." I looked around the apartment, taking in details I'd never noticed during previous visits. Gaming equipment that cost thousands of dollars. A wine collection that suggested regular expensive purchases. Furniture that looked like it came from upscale retailers rather than the budget stores college students typically frequented. "Amanda, I need you to explain to me exactly what you meant when you told Mom I'd be embarrassed to go on a family vacation." She exchanged a glance with Tyler before answering. "Look, Robert, it's not personal. But you have to admit that when we're all together, things get weird. You always end up talking about work or making comments about money, and it makes everyone uncomfortable. When have I ever made inappropriate comments about money during family time?" Tyler jumped in before Amanda could respond. "Dude, come on. You're always mentioning how much things cost or talking about your business deals. It's like you want everyone to know how successful you are compared to the rest of us." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. I tried to think of specific instances where I'd behaved the way Tyler was describing, but couldn't recall any. Most of our family conversations revolved around Amanda's school experiences, my parents' retirement activities, or general topics like movies and current events. "Can you give me a specific example of when I've done that?" Amanda shifted uncomfortably. "It's not any one thing, Robert. It's more like an overall vibe. Like at my graduation dinner, you kept mentioning the restaurant's prices and making jokes about the wine list. It made everyone feel like you were showing off. I remembered that dinner clearly. The restaurant had been expensive, and I'd made light comments about the cost because I was genuinely happy to celebrate Amanda's achievement and wanted everyone to order whatever they wanted without worrying about money. What I'd intended as reassurance that cost wasn't an issue they'd apparently interpreted as bragging. Amanda, I was trying to make sure everyone felt comfortable ordering what they wanted. I never intended to make anyone feel bad." "But that's exactly the problem," Tyler said, settling back into what was clearly his regular spot on the couch. "You don't see how your money creates pressure for everyone else? Like when you pay for stuff, it makes everyone else look cheap if they don't offer to cover things too? So the solution is to exclude me from family events." Amanda's voice became defensive. "We thought you'd actually be relieved not to have to worry about family stuff for a while. You're always so busy with work, and Mom said you've seemed stressed lately about all the financial help you've been giving everyone." That stopped me cold. Mom said I seemed stressed about helping the family financially. Well, yeah. She mentioned that you've been working really long hours, and that maybe you were feeling overwhelmed by everyone depending on you so much. The manipulation was becoming clearer. Patricia had apparently been framing my work ethic and financial generosity as signs of stress and burden, rather than choices I'd made willingly to help my family. And now that narrative was being used to justify excluding me from family activities. "Amanda, has it occurred to you that I work long hours because I want to be able to help our family? That supporting you all financially isn't a burden, but something I choose to do because I love you?" Tyler laughed, actually laughed at my statement. "That's exactly the kind of thing that makes people uncomfortable, man. You're acting like you're some kind of family savior instead of just a guy who got lucky in business." Lucky. The word came out sharper than I'd intended. Amanda quickly tried to defuse the tension. "Tyler doesn't mean anything bad by that. It's just that your success has kind of changed the family dynamic, you know. Like everyone feels guilty when you pay for things, but then they also feel bad if they can't afford to do the same things you can afford. So instead of talking to me about this, the solution was to plan a family vacation behind my back and exclude me from it." The silence that followed was answer enough. Amanda looked down at her hands while Tyler stared at his phone, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. "There's something else you should know," Amanda finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom and Dad have been talking to Aunt Susan and Uncle Mark about your behavior lately. They're worried that all the financial help you give is actually your way of controlling the family. The accusation was so absurd and painful that I actually felt dizzy for a moment. Controlling the family? By helping with mortgage payments and tuition? They think you use money to make people feel obligated to you, like you pay for things and then expect everyone to be grateful and do what you want. Tyler nodded along with Amanda's explanation. Your dad mentioned that you always bring up how much you've helped whenever there's any kind of family disagreement. When have I ever done that? Neither of them could provide a specific example, but they both seemed convinced that this behavior pattern existed. I realized I was dealing with a narrative that had been building behind my back for months, possibly years. A story about my motives and character that bore no resemblance to my actual intentions or actions. Amanda, do you remember 2 years ago when Mom and Dad were facing foreclosure? Yeah, of course. Do you remember me ever bringing that up during family discussions or using it to influence family decisions? She hesitated. No, but that's not the point. The point is that everyone feels weird about owing you so much money. Nobody owes me anything. I've never asked to be paid back or treated any of that money as loans. But that's exactly what makes it weird, Tyler interjected. Like if it was official loans, everyone would know where they stand. But this way, it's like you're keeping track of everything, even if you don't say so. I looked at my sister, searching her face for any sign of the gratitude or affection I'd thought existed between us. What I saw instead was a young woman who'd grown comfortable viewing my financial support as an entitlement, while simultaneously resenting me for providing it. Amanda, do you actually want me to stop helping with your tuition and living expenses? The question clearly caught her off guard. That's not what this is about, Robert. Then what is it about? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you want all the benefits of having a financially successful brother without actually having to include that brother in your life. Tyler stood up abruptly. Look, man, I think you're taking this way too personally. It's just one vacation. Your family isn't trying to hurt you. My family planned a months-long vacation, kept it secret from me, and then told me I was excluded because I'm an embarrassment. How exactly should I be taking that? Amanda's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were from guilt or frustration. Robert, we just wanted one trip where we could be together without worrying about money dynamics or work stress or any of that stuff. Is that really so terrible? The question revealed everything I needed to know. In Amanda's mind, my presence was synonymous with money dynamics and work stress. I wasn't her brother who happened to be financially successful. I was a walking reminder of obligations and complications that made family time less enjoyable. As I drove home from Amanda's apartment, I realized that the problem went far deeper than one excluded vacation. Somewhere along the way, my family had fundamentally changed how they saw me and my role in their lives. The generous brother had become the controlling benefactor. The hard worker had become the show-off. The family member had become the outsider whose presence created discomfort rather than joy. 2 days later, Patricia called with what she described as a solution. Robert, honey, I think we all got our wires crossed about this vacation situation. Why don't we have a family meeting tomorrow evening? Dad and I want to clear the air, and I've asked Susan and Mark to join us since there's such good perspective on family dynamics. The mention of my aunt and uncle surprised me. Susan and Mark lived about an hour away and typically only joined family gatherings during major holidays. Their inclusion in this discussion suggested that my problematic behavior had become a topic of conversation extending beyond my immediate family. I arrived at my parents' house the next evening to find cars in the driveway that confirmed this wasn't going to be a casual family chat. Susan and Mark were already there along with Amanda and Tyler. Through the front window, I could see everyone gathered in the living room in what looked like a pre-planned arrangement. Patricia answered the door with an overly bright smile that immediately put me on alert. Robert, come in, sweetheart. Everyone's so glad you could make it. The living room had been arranged with chairs forming a semicircle, and an empty chair positioned across from the group clearly designated for me. The setup felt uncomfortably similar to an intervention, and the serious expressions on everyone's faces confirmed that impression. Douglas cleared his throat as I sat down. "Son, we've all been talking, and we think there are some communication issues we need to address as a family." Aunt Susan leaned forward with the kind of concerned expression typically reserved for discussing serious medical diagnoses. "Robert, honey, we love you so much, and that's exactly why we're worried about some patterns we've been noticing lately." "What patterns?" Uncle Mark pulled out a small notebook, suggesting this conversation had been planned with military precision. "Well, for starters, there's the financial situation. Now, we all appreciate how generous you've been with everyone, but it's created some unhealthy dynamics that we think need to be addressed. I looked around the room, taking in the faces of people I'd considered my closest family members. Amanda avoided eye contact while Tyler examined his fingernails. Patricia wrung her hands in her lap, and Douglas stared at a point somewhere above my head. "What kind of unhealthy dynamics?" Susan consulted her own notes before responding. "Robert, when you constantly pay for family expenses, it puts everyone else in an uncomfortable position. People feel obligated to you, and that changes the natural flow of family relationships." "I've never asked anyone to feel obligated to me." Mark nodded as if he'd expected that response. "But that's exactly the problem, son. You don't ask directly, but the financial help creates implicit expectations. When someone pays your mortgage or covers major expenses, there's an automatic power imbalance that affects how family members interact with each other." Douglas finally made eye contact with me. "Robert, I need to be honest with you about something. I've been embarrassed to tell my friends that my son has to support me financially. It makes me feel like I failed as a father and provider." The admission hit me harder than any of the previous criticisms. "Dad, you didn't fail at anything. You worked for 35 years and deserve to enjoy retirement. The economic situation changed, and I was fortunate enough to be in a position to help." "But that's just it," Patricia interjected. "Your fortune, your success, it's wonderful, but it's also created problems for everyone else. When you can afford things that other family members can't, it highlights everyone else's limitations." Amanda finally looked up from her hands. "Robert, at Northwestern, when I tell people about my family, I have to explain why my brother pays for everything. It's awkward and makes people ask questions about why my parents can't support themselves." "What people are asking you questions about our family's private financial arrangements," Tyler answered instead of Amanda. "Her friends, study groups, people she dates. When someone your age is financially responsible for their entire family, it raises questions about what's really going on. What's really going on is that I love my family and want to help them live comfortably." Susan shook her head sympathetically. "Robert, sweetheart, that's a beautiful sentiment, but the reality is that your help has become a crutch that's preventing everyone else from developing their own independence and self-sufficiency." Uncle Mark consulted his notebook again. "We've prepared some suggestions for how to address these issues going forward. First, we think you should consider scaling back the financial support gradually so everyone can learn to manage their own expenses again. Second," Douglas continued, "we'd like you to consider whether your work schedule is preventing you from having normal family relationships. You're always busy, always stressed about business, and it makes family gatherings feel tense." Patricia reached into her purse and pulled out a printed document. "We've actually written up some guidelines for how we can all improve our family dynamics. These are just suggestions, Robert, but we think they could help everyone feel more comfortable." I took the paper and scanned the contents with growing disbelief. The document, titled Family Relationship Guidelines, contained 8 numbered points that essentially outlined how I should behave to make everyone else more comfortable. The suggestions included limiting discussion of work or business achievements, allowing other family members to pay for activities occasionally, even if I could afford them easily, and avoiding comments about costs or expenses during family activities. You wrote up a list of rules for how I should behave during family time. Amanda's voice carried a defensive tone. They're not rules, Robert. They're just ideas for how we can all interact more naturally without the money stuff getting in the way. The money stuff that allows you to live in a nice apartment near campus and attend a prestigious university, the room went silent. Douglas's expression hardened, and I realized I'd just confirmed their narrative about my using financial support as leverage in family discussions. Mark leaned back in his chair. Robert, that kind of comment is exactly what we're talking about. When you bring up the financial help during family conversations, it makes everyone feel guilty and defensive. I brought it up because you're asking me to pretend that financial reality doesn't exist, while simultaneously benefiting from my willingness to share that reality with all of you. Susan sighed deeply. Robert, honey, can't you see that your attitude about money has become problematic? You've turned financial generosity into a source of family tension. I've turned financial generosity into family tension. Or have all of you turned financial generosity into a source of guilt and resentment? Tyler spoke up for the first time during the formal discussion. Look, Robert, I think everyone here appreciates what you've done for the family. But you have to admit that the current situation isn't healthy for anyone, including you. What would be healthy in your opinion? Patricia pulled out another document, this one featuring colorful charts and graphs. We've actually researched some family counseling approaches that focus on financial boundaries. There are therapists who specialize in helping families navigate situations where one member is significantly more affluent than others. You want me to go to therapy to learn how to have a family relationship? Douglas nodded earnestly. Son, we all think it could be helpful. Not just for you, but for all of us. We want to learn how to be a normal family again without all these complicated financial obligations affecting how we relate to each other. I looked around the room at these people who had gathered to collectively diagnose my character flaws and prescribe solutions for my problematic behavior. The irony was staggering. They wanted to normalize our family relationships while maintaining all the financial benefits my success provided. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, I said slowly. You want me to continue providing financial support for everyone's lifestyle, but you want me to do it in a way that doesn't make anyone feel uncomfortable about accepting that support. Mark nodded approvingly. Exactly. You've got it, Robert. We're not asking you to stop being generous. We're asking you to be generous in a way that preserves everyone's dignity. And the vacation, how does excluding me from family trips preserve anyone's dignity? Amanda finally made sustained eye contact with me. Robert, we thought one vacation without financial pressure might help everyone remember how to just enjoy being together as a family, without thinking about who's paying for what or feeling guilty about expensive activities. But someone still has to pay for the vacation. It's not free just because I'm not there. The silence that followed revealed the fundamental flaw in their logic. Patricia eventually cleared her throat. Well, we thought we'd try to manage a more budget-friendly trip this time, something everyone could contribute to equally. And when you realized you couldn't afford the Europe trip on a budget that everyone could contribute to equally, Douglas shifted uncomfortably. We figured we'd cross that bridge when we came to it. Tyler pulled out his phone and started typing, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. Amanda stared at her hands again, and the relatives avoided eye contact. You figured you'd cross that bridge when you came to it, I repeated, which means you were hoping I'd volunteer to pay for the vacation while agreeing to stay home so everyone else could enjoy it without feeling guilty about my financial contribution. Patricia's voice became almost pleading. Robert, honey, we just want everyone to be happy, including you. Can't we find a way to make this work for everyone? I stood up from my chair, still holding their printed family guidelines. I need some time to think about all of this. You've given me a lot to consider. As I walked toward the door, Susan called after me. Robert, we hope you know this all comes from a place of love. We want what's best for everyone, including you. I turned back to look at the group one final time. I understand that you believe that. I just need to figure out whether what you think is best for everyone is actually what's best for me. Driving home that evening, I realized that my family had spent months analyzing my behavior, planning interventions, and developing strategies to manage what they saw as my problematic approach to family relationships. But in all their planning and discussion, none of them had considered the possibility that their approach to my financial contributions was the actual source of the problem. I spent 3 sleepless nights reviewing everything that had been said during the family meeting. The printed guidelines sat on my kitchen counter, a constant reminder of how my relatives viewed my role in their lives. On the 4th morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Patricia and asked to arrange one final family discussion. Mom, I want everyone who was at the meeting to come back, including Susan and Mark. I have some things I need to share with all of you. Oh, Robert, I'm so glad you want to continue working on this together. What time works for you? That evening, I arrived at my parents' house carrying a leather portfolio that contained 3 years of financial records. I'd spent the previous day organizing every payment transfer and expense I'd covered for various family members, creating a comprehensive picture of exactly how much my problematic generosity had actually cost me. The same semicircle arrangement awaited me, but this time I remained standing rather than taking the designated chair. I opened the portfolio and pulled out the first document. Before we continue discussing my behavior and how it needs to change, I want everyone to understand exactly what my financial contribution to this family has actually been. Douglas frowned. Son, we're not here to talk about money. We're here to talk about relationships. The two things are connected, Dad, whether you want to acknowledge that or not. I held up a detailed spreadsheet. Over the past 3 years, I have transferred $47,312 to various family members for various expenses. This doesn't include restaurant bills, gifts, or activities I've paid for during family gatherings. Patricia looked uncomfortable. Robert, honey, we appreciate everything you've done, but keeping track like that makes it seem like you're maintaining a ledger of family obligations. I'm maintaining a record of my business expenses, Mom, because that's what this has become for me. A business relationship where I provide financial services and you all provide feedback about how those services should be delivered. I pulled out another document. Amanda, your Northwestern University tuition for the past 2 years, $16,400. Your apartment deposit monthly rent supplements and emergency expenses, $8,700. Various clothing, textbook, and social expenses, $3,100. Total investment in your education and lifestyle, $28,200. Amanda's face went pale. Robert, I never asked you to keep track of all that. You're right. You never asked me to keep track. You also never asked me to pay for any of it. You simply accepted it as something I would naturally do because I loved you and wanted you to succeed. Tyler shifted uncomfortably as I continued. The interesting thing about these numbers is that they represent approximately 1,400 hours of work for me. 1,400 hours that I spent building my business specifically so I could afford to support my family's lifestyle. Mark held up a hand. Robert, this kind of detailed accounting is exactly what we were talking about. Family relationships shouldn't be about financial scorekeeping. I pulled out a third document. Uncle Mark, you're absolutely right. Family relationships shouldn't be about financial scorekeeping. So let me share some numbers that might interest you. During the same 3-year period, my own personal expenses were rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in a mediocre neighborhood, $24,000. My own food and basic living expenses, approximately $9,000. Entertainment and personal activities, roughly $3,000. Total personal spending over 3 years, $36,000. The room was completely silent now. Susan stared at me with growing alarm. What this means, I continued, is that I spent more money on Amanda's college experience than I spent on my own entire lifestyle. I spent more on your mortgage payments, Dad, than I spent on my own housing. I prioritized everyone else's comfort over my own financial security and personal enjoyment. Douglas stood up abruptly. Robert, that's enough. Nobody forced you to make those choices. You're absolutely correct, Dad. Nobody forced me to make those choices. I made them because I thought we were a family that supported each other. I made them because I thought my success could benefit people I loved. I made them because I was foolish enough to believe that financial generosity would be appreciated rather than resented. Amanda started crying, but I continued before anyone could interrupt. But here's what really breaks my heart about this situation. It's not the money. It's not even the lack of gratitude. It's the fact that you all spent months discussing what was wrong with me, planning interventions for my behavior, and developing strategies to manage my problematic personality. And not once did any of you consider having a direct, honest conversation with me about how my financial contributions were affecting our relationships. Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. Robert, we were trying to protect your feelings. You were trying to protect your financial support, Mom. There's a difference. Tyler finally spoke up. Robert, I think you're being unfair to everyone here. Nobody's trying to take advantage of you. I turned to face Tyler directly. What do you do for work, Tyler? I'm a student. Where do you get money for living expenses? Amanda answered for him. I help Tyler out sometimes when he needs it. With money I give you for your own expenses. That's not how it works, Robert. That's exactly how it works, Amanda. I give you money for school and living expenses. You share that money with your boyfriend, and then your boyfriend lectures me about family dynamics and financial boundaries. Mark stood up clearly, trying to regain control of the conversation. Robert, you're getting emotional and saying things you'll regret. Why don't we take a break and continue this when everyone's had time to cool down? I'm emotional, Uncle Mark. I'm devastated, I'm heartbroken, and I'm furious. I pulled out the final document from my portfolio. This is a summary of my work schedule over the past 3 years, an average of 72 hours per week, 83% of weekends spent working, canceled vacations 4, canceled social events countless, ended romantic relationships due to work schedule 2. The numbers hung in the air like an indictment. I have sacrificed my health, my social life, my personal relationships, and my own financial security to provide for this family. And your response to that sacrifice is to tell me that my generosity has become problematic and needs to be managed through therapy and behavioral guidelines. Douglas's face was red with anger. Robert, nobody asked you to sacrifice anything. Nobody forced you to work those hours or pay for things you couldn't afford. You're right, Dad. Nobody forced me. But nobody's forcing you to accept my help either. Nobody's forcing you to live in a house you can't afford. Nobody's forcing Amanda to attend a private university on someone else's dime. Nobody's forcing any of you to maintain lifestyles that require my financial support. Patricia started crying now, but her tears only made me angrier. And the most insulting part of this entire situation is that after benefiting from 3 years of financial support that allowed all of you to live more comfortably than you could have otherwise afforded, your big family meeting conclusion is that I need to learn how to be generous without making anyone feel bad about accepting generosity. I closed the portfolio and looked around the room one final time. Well, I have a different solution to this problem. If my financial contributions are creating unhealthy family dynamics, then the obvious answer is to eliminate those contributions entirely. Susan gasped, Robert, you don't mean that. I absolutely mean that. Effective immediately, I'm discontinuing all financial support for everyone in this room. No more mortgage payments, no more tuition assistance, no more emergency loans, no more covering family activities or expenses. Amanda jumped up from her chair. Robert, you can't be serious. That would destroy everyone. Amanda, according to all of you, my financial help was destroying our family relationships. I'm simply removing the source of destruction. Douglas took a step toward me, his hands clenched into fists. Robert, you're being vindictive and childish. This isn't how family members treat each other. You're right, Dad. This isn't how family members treat each other. Family members don't plan elaborate vacations while excluding one person. Family members don't hold intervention meetings to discuss someone's character flaws. Family members don't develop behavioral guidelines for managing problematic relatives. I headed toward the door but turned back before leaving. You all wanted to understand healthy family financial boundaries. Well, here's the healthiest boundary I can establish from now on. We'll all be financially responsible for our own lives. That way, nobody will feel obligated, guilty, or uncomfortable about accepting help from their problematic, controlling, embarrassing family member. Patricia called after me as I reached the door. Robert, please don't leave like this. We can work this out. Mom, you were right about one thing. This situation needed to change. It just needed to change in a way that protected my dignity and emotional well-being rather than everyone else's financial comfort. As I walked to my car, I could hear raised voices from inside the house. Amanda was crying loudly, Douglas was shouting about ingratitude and family loyalty, and multiple people were talking at once in what sounded like panic. For the first time in 3 years, their financial emergency wasn't my problem to solve. I drove straight from my parents' house to my office, even though it was almost 9 in the evening. I needed to document everything while the conversation was still fresh in my memory, and I had several important phone calls to make. The first call was to my bank. Chase had a 24-hour customer service line for business accounts, and I explained that I needed to make immediate changes to all accounts that had authorized users or beneficiaries beyond myself. Mr. Rodriguez, I see you have 3 accounts with additional authorized users. Your parents, Patricia and Douglas Rodriguez, are listed on your primary checking account, and your sister, Amanda Rodriguez, has access to your secondary savings account. Would you like to remove these authorizations? Yes, immediately. I also need to know about any automatic transfers or scheduled payments from my accounts to external recipients. The customer service representative, Jennifer, took several minutes to review my account activity. Mr. Rodriguez, I see you have automatic monthly transfers set up. $2,400 monthly to First National Bank for what appears to be a mortgage payment, and $800 monthly to Northwestern University for tuition payments. You also have irregular but frequent transfers to an Amanda Rodriguez checking account. I want all of those automatic transfers canceled immediately, and I want all authorized users removed from every account tonight. Sir, I can process the authorized user removals immediately, but the automatic transfers will require you to contact the receiving institutions directly to ensure the changes don't create problems with their payment systems. That made sense. I thanked Jennifer and moved on to the next call. First National Bank's after-hours customer service was less helpful, but I managed to speak with a supervisor who could access my parents' mortgage account information. The conversation revealed something that made my blood pressure spike dramatically. Mr. Rodriguez, I see that you're listed as the primary contact for this mortgage account, and you've been making the full monthly payments for approximately 18 months. However, according to our records, the actual account holders, Patricia and Douglas Rodriguez, haven't made a single payment toward this mortgage in over 2 years. What do you mean they haven't made a single payment? Sir, the only payments we've received for this account have come from your Chase checking account. The account holders themselves haven't contributed anything toward the mortgage balance. I asked the supervisor to email me a detailed payment history for the account. What I discovered when I reviewed it later that night was even worse than I'd imagined. Not only had my parents stopped making mortgage payments when I started helping them, they'd actually increased their monthly spending on credit cards and other expenses, apparently assuming that I would continue covering their housing costs indefinitely. The Northwestern University payment system was more complicated, but eventually I reached a financial aid counselor who could review Amanda's account details. Here I learned something that explained a lot about Amanda's attitude toward my financial contributions. Mr. Rodriguez, I see that you've been listed as the primary payer for this student's account. However, according to our records, Amanda Rodriguez has been receiving additional financial aid that she hasn't reported to your payment arrangements. What kind of additional financial aid? She's receiving a partial academic scholarship and a work-study grant that covers approximately 40% of her total expenses. The payments you've been making have essentially been covering costs that were already covered by other funding sources. This meant Amanda had been receiving money from me for expenses that were already paid for through her financial aid, effectively giving her several $1,000s in discretionary spending money that she'd never mentioned to me or the family. My final call was to my credit card companies. I had provided Amanda with an authorized user card on my primary credit account for emergencies, and I wanted to review exactly how that card had been used over the past several months. The spending history was illuminating. Amanda's card showed regular charges at high-end restaurants, expensive clothing stores, and entertainment venues. There were also frequent charges at stores that catered to men's clothing and accessories, which I assumed were purchases for Tyler. The emergency credit card had been used for over $6,000 in discretionary spending over the past 6 months. By the time I finished making all these phone calls and reviewing account histories, it was almost 2 in the morning. I sat in my office chair staring out at the Chicago skyline, trying to process the full scope of how thoroughly my family had taken advantage of my financial generosity. My parents had essentially retired early using my mortgage payments to subsidize a lifestyle they couldn't afford while spending their own money on luxuries and entertainment. Amanda had been collecting both my tuition payments and her financial aid, pocketing the difference while using my credit card to fund an expensive social life for herself and her boyfriend. And everyone had convinced themselves that I was the one with problematic behavior that needed to be managed. Over the next 2 days, I systematically dismantled every financial connection between myself and my family members. I removed all authorized users from my accounts, canceled all automatic transfers, and contacted every institution that had been receiving payments from me on their behalf. The first sign that my family was taking my financial cutoff seriously came on Thursday afternoon when Patricia called my office in what sounded like a complete panic. "Robert, honey, something terrible has happened. Our credit cards were declined at the grocery store, and when I called the bank, they said our account has insufficient funds. I think there might be some kind of fraud or mistake with our accounts." I let the call go to voicemail, but listened to the message immediately. Patricia's voice carried a kind of frantic energy that suggested she genuinely hadn't expected me to follow through on my threat to cut off financial support. The second call came from Amanda about 3 hours later. "Robert, Northwestern is saying my tuition payment for next semester is overdue. I thought you had that set up automatically. Can you call them and figure out what happened?" Again, I let the call go to voicemail. Amanda's tone suggested she viewed this as a minor technical problem rather than a consequence of our family meeting. By Friday morning, I had 7 missed calls from various family members and 3 voicemails from Douglas that became progressively more angry and threatening. "Robert, this is your father. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but this has gone far enough. Call me back immediately." "Robert, it's Dad again. Your mother is crying because she can't afford groceries, and Amanda is panicking about school. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Now fix this before you cause permanent damage to this family." "Robert, this is completely unacceptable. You can't just abandon your family because you got your feelings hurt during one conversation. If you don't call back by tonight, we're going to have to take legal action to protect ourselves." Legal action. I almost laughed at the threat. What legal action could they possibly take? I'd never signed any contracts obligating me to support them financially, and I'd certainly never done anything illegal by choosing to discontinue voluntary financial assistance. Around noon on Friday, my office assistant Jessica knocked on my door with a concerned expression. "Mr. Rodriguez, there's a young woman in the lobby who says she's your sister. She's quite upset and insisting that she needs to speak with you immediately." Should I call security, or would you like me to tell her you're unavailable? Through my office window, I could see Amanda pacing in the lobby area, clearly agitated and attracting attention from other people in the building. Her dramatic behavior was creating exactly the kind of scene that would reinforce every negative assumption my colleagues might have about my family dynamics. Tell her I'm in meetings all afternoon and unable to see anyone without an appointment. If she continues to cause a disturbance, please do call security. Jessica nodded and returned to the lobby. I watched through the window as she spoke with Amanda, whose reaction involved a lot of animated gesturing and what appeared to be crying. Eventually, building security approached Amanda and had what looked like a firm but polite conversation that resulted in her leaving the building. That evening, I received a text message from Tyler. "Robert, you're destroying Amanda's life over a stupid family argument. She's having panic attacks about school and can't eat. Whatever your parents did to upset you, she doesn't deserve to suffer for it. Call her back." The text message perfectly captured the fundamental misunderstanding that my family had about the situation. In Tyler's mind, this was about my hurt feelings over a stupid family argument, rather than a systematic pattern of exploitation and disrespect that had been building for years. I turned off my phone and spent the weekend hiking alone in a state park outside the city. For the first time in 3 years, I had a weekend completely free of family obligations, financial emergencies, or guilt about not working enough hours to afford someone else's lifestyle. It was the most peaceful 2 days I'd experienced in years. Monday morning brought a series of developments that confirmed my family was beginning to understand the serious nature of their situation. My office phone rang at 8:30 with a call from First National Bank. "Mr. Rodriguez, this is Karen Williams from First National. I'm calling because we received a request from Patricia and Douglas Rodriguez to discuss their mortgage account, but they're not authorized to access information about payments that originate from your accounts." That's correct. I'm no longer making payments toward their mortgage. "Sir, they've missed their payment for this month, and we're required to notify them that they have 10 days to bring the account current before we begin foreclosure proceedings. Since you've been the primary payer, we wanted to confirm that this situation is intentional rather than an oversight." It's completely intentional. They are now responsible for their own mortgage payments. "Understood, sir. We'll proceed with our standard collection procedures." After hanging up, I called my voicemail system and found 12 new messages from various family members. The tone had shifted dramatically from confusion and anger to what sounded like genuine panic. Patricia's latest message was barely coherent. "Robert, honey, please call me back. The bank is saying we have 10 days to pay the mortgage or they'll take the house. I don't understand what's happening. Please, sweetheart, we need to talk." Amanda had left 3 messages, each more desperate than the last. "Robert, Northwestern is dropping me from classes if I don't pay tuition by Wednesday. This is my entire future. Please don't destroy my education because you're mad at mom and dad." Douglas had apparently reached the bargaining stage. "Son, I think we all said some things we didn't mean at that family meeting. Your mother and I have been talking and we realize we may have been insensitive about your feelings. Let's sit down and work this out like adults." Around noon, Jessica informed me that Tyler was in the lobby requesting to speak with me about a family emergency. I agreed to see him, curious about what approach he would take. Tyler entered my office looking like he hadn't slept in days. His expensive athletic wear had been replaced by rumpled clothing that suggested he'd been dealing with crisis management for the past several days. "Robert, I need to talk to you about Amanda. She's not handling this well at all." "What exactly is she not handling well?" "Dude, she got kicked out of her apartment yesterday because she can't pay rent without your help. She's staying with friends, but she's completely panicking about tuition and living expenses. She hasn't eaten in 2 days. I leaned back in my chair, genuinely curious about Tyler's perspective on these developments. "And you're here because you want me to resume paying Amanda's expenses?" "I'm here because I think you're being vindictive and cruel. Like, I get that you were upset about the vacation thing, but destroying someone's college education over a family argument is psychotic." Tyler helped me understand something. You've been dating Amanda for 8 months? Almost a year. And during that time, how much of Amanda's lifestyle have you been contributing to financially? Tyler's expression shifted uncomfortably. That's not relevant. We're students. Neither of us has much money. But Amanda has had money. Money from me that she's been sharing with you. Money that paid for dates, clothes, entertainment, and probably some of your living expenses too. Amanda helps me out sometimes, but that's what people in relationships do for each other. Right. And what have you done for Amanda? What's your contribution to this relationship besides spending money that I earned and shared with her? Tyler stood up abruptly. Look, Robert, I didn't come here to be lectured about my relationship. I came here because Amanda needs help and you're her brother. I am her brother. I'm the brother who paid for her apartment, her tuition, her credit card bills, and apparently her boyfriend's lifestyle. And her response to that generosity was to tell our parents that my presence at family events was embarrassing. She never meant anything personal by that. Tyler. What she meant is irrelevant. What matters is that she said it, my parents accepted it, and the entire family spent months planning ways to manage my problematic behavior. Instead of having an honest conversation about the situation, Tyler sat back down, apparently realizing that aggressive tactics weren't going to work. Okay, fine. Maybe everyone handled the communication badly. But Amanda doesn't deserve to have her entire future destroyed because of that. Amanda's future isn't being destroyed. Amanda's future is being determined by Amanda's choices and Amanda's ability to support herself financially, the same way everyone else's future is determined. But she can't afford college without your help. Then she should make the same choices that millions of other people make when they can't afford expensive private universities. She can transfer to a less expensive school, apply for additional financial aid, get a job, or take out student loans. Tyler stared at me with genuine bewilderment. You're really going to let your own sister drop out of Northwestern because you got your feelings hurt? The question revealed everything I needed to understand about how my family viewed this situation. In their minds, Amanda's Northwestern education was my responsibility rather than her privilege. My financial support wasn't generosity. It was an obligation that I was now failing to meet. Tyler, Amanda isn't dropping out of Northwestern because I got my feelings hurt. Amanda is facing the natural consequences of choosing to insult and exclude someone who had been voluntarily subsidizing her lifestyle. So this is punishment. This is reality. Actions have consequences. When you treat people badly, they stop doing nice things for you. When you exclude family members from family events, those family members stop prioritizing your well-being. When you call someone embarrassing, that person stops caring about your opinion or your problems. Tyler left my office without any commitment to help Amanda beyond telling her to figure something out. His casual abandonment of her crisis perfectly illustrated the difference between people who benefit from generosity and people who provide it. That afternoon, I received a call from Susan, my aunt, who had apparently been designated as the family's negotiator. Robert, honey, your parents are beside themselves. They're talking about having to sell the house and move into a tiny apartment. Douglas is looking for work, but you know how difficult it is for someone his age to find employment. Susan Douglas is 63 years old and chose to retire early when I started helping with the mortgage. If he needs income, he can make the same choices that other 63-year-olds make when they need money. But Robert, their family, doesn't that mean anything to you? It meant everything to me, Susan. That's why I spent 3 years sacrificing my own financial security and personal life to support them. But apparently, family means something different to all of you than it means to me. What do you mean? I mean that my definition of family includes loyalty, respect, gratitude, and inclusion. Your definition of family seems to include financial exploitation disguised as emotional manipulation. Susan was quiet for a long moment. Robert, if you don't help your parents keep their house, where are they supposed to live? That's not my problem to solve anymore, Susan. They're adults who can figure out their own housing situation. the same way that adults have been doing for thousands of years. But they counted on you. And I counted on them to treat me with basic respect and consideration. We all had expectations that didn't work out. 3 days later, Jessica informed me that Amanda had been calling the office every few hours, but she'd instructed the receptionist to tell her I was unavailable. I was reviewing financial projections when Jessica knocked on my door with an update. Mr. Rodriguez, your sister called again, but this time she was crying and said to tell you that Northwestern has officially dropped her from classes for non-payment. She wanted me to ask if you would reconsider helping her for just one more semester while she figures out alternative arrangements. I thought about Amanda sitting in her expensive apartment wearing clothes I'd purchased with credit cards I'd provided, surrounded by furniture and electronics I'd indirectly funded, asking for just one more semester of financial support, while maintaining that my presence at family gatherings was too embarrassing to tolerate. Jessica, please have the receptionist tell Amanda that her academic situation is no longer my concern, and that she should direct any future calls to our parents or financial aid counselors. Should I block her number from calling the office? Not yet, but if she becomes disruptive or starts affecting office operations, then yes. That evening, I received the most interesting call yet. Mark, my uncle, who had helped organize the intervention meeting and presented me with behavioral guidelines for managing my problematic generosity. Robert, I think there's been a serious misunderstanding about what everyone was trying to accomplish at that family meeting. What kind of misunderstanding? Well, nobody expected you to cut off all support immediately. We were hoping for gradual changes that would help everyone adjust slowly. Mark, you handed me a document titled Family Relationship Guidelines that outlined how I should modify my behavior to make everyone else more comfortable. The logical conclusion of those guidelines was that I should continue providing financial support while eliminating anything about my personality or behavior that made accepting that support feel awkward for everyone else. That's not how we intended it. How did you intend it? Mark was quiet for several seconds. Robert, we just wanted everyone to be happy. Including me. Of course, including you. Mark, in your vision of everyone being happy, was I supposed to be happy about being excluded from family vacations while continuing to pay for family vacations? We thought maybe you'd be relieved not to have to worry about family obligations. I was never worried about family obligations, Mark. I was worried about family members who couldn't afford their obligations. There's a difference. Look, Robert, I think we all underestimated how hurt you would be by the vacation situation. You didn't underestimate anything, Mark. You calculated exactly how much disrespect I would tolerate in exchange for continuing to provide financial support. You just calculated wrong. The conversation ended with Mark promising to talk to everyone about finding a solution that worked for everyone, which I interpreted as damage control planning for the financial crisis that was about to devastate my relatives. Over the next week, the consequences of my financial withdrawal cascaded through my family's lifestyle in ways that clearly none of them had anticipated. Douglas managed to find part-time work at a hardware store, but his salary barely covered grocery expenses. Patricia started selling furniture and household items to pay utility bills. Amanda moved home after losing her apartment, creating tension between her and Douglas, who blamed her attitude about the vacation for creating the entire crisis. Tyler broke up with Amanda when her financial support disappeared, confirming that their relationship had been more about lifestyle subsidies than emotional connection. Amanda started working at a local diner but quit after 3 days, when she realized that waitressing required dealing with demanding customers and standing for long periods. Most satisfying to me was learning that Susan and Mark, the relatives who had been so eager to provide advice about healthy family financial boundaries, had declined to provide any actual financial assistance when Patricia asked them for help with the mortgage payments. For the first time in 3 years, my family was experiencing the natural consequences of their actual earning capacity and financial decisions. And those consequences were teaching them lessons about gratitude, humility, and the value of supportive family relationships that no amount of therapy or behavioral guidelines could have provided. 6 months later, my life looked completely different, and so did my relationship with my family. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, but the results were more positive than I could have imagined when I first walked away from that devastating family meeting. The biggest change in my life was my relationship with Sarah Chen, a fellow entrepreneur I'd met at a business networking event 3 months after cutting off my family's financial support. Sarah owned a successful marketing consultancy and immediately understood the work ethic and time commitment required to build a thriving business. Instead of viewing my professional success as a source of pressure or embarrassment, she appreciated it as evidence of discipline and determination. "I love that you're ambitious," Sarah told me during one of our early conversations. "I've dated too many guys who were intimidated by successful women or who expected me to tone down my career achievements to make them feel better about themselves." Our relationship developed naturally, without the complicated financial dynamics that had poisoned my family relationships. Sarah and I split expenses equally, planned activities within both of our budgets, and supported each other's professional goals without anyone feeling obligated or guilty about money differences. My business had also flourished since I'd stopped working 70-hour weeks to subsidize other people's lifestyles. With normal work hours, I'd been able to focus more strategically on high-value clients and expand my service offerings. My revenue had increased by 38%, and I'd been able to hire an additional consultant to help manage the growing client base. But the most significant changes had happened within my family, though those changes had required everyone to experience some difficult realities first. Patricia had called me in early December, 6 months after our final confrontation, with a tone I'd never heard from her before. "Robert, honey, I owe you an enormous apology. Your father and I have spent the past few months learning what it actually costs to maintain our lifestyle, and we had no idea how much you were sacrificing to help us." She went on to explain that Douglas had found full-time work at a construction company despite being 63 years old, and that they'd downsized to a smaller house they could actually afford on their combined income. "We've been living beyond our means for years, and instead of being grateful that you made that possible, we resented you for highlighting how dependent we'd become. That was wrong, and I'm ashamed of how we treated you." Douglas had apologized separately, admitting that his embarrassment about accepting financial help from his son had created resentment that he'd wrongly directed toward me. "Son, I was raised to believe that a man should provide for his family, and when I couldn't do that anymore, I felt like a failure. Instead of appreciating your success and generosity, I let my own insecurities turn me against you. That was my problem, not yours." Amanda's transformation had been the most dramatic. Losing her Northwestern placement had initially devastated her, but it had also forced her to confront realities she'd been avoiding since high school. She'd eventually enrolled at a state university where she qualified for significant financial aid and discovered that a less expensive education could still provide excellent opportunities for someone willing to work hard. She'd also maintained steady employment at a local restaurant, where she'd learned valuable lessons about customer service, time management, and the satisfaction of earning her own money. "Robert, I need to tell you something that's been bothering me for months," Amanda said during our first real conversation since the financial cutoff. "When I told Mom and Dad that you were embarrassing, I wasn't talking about anything you'd actually done. I was jealous of your success and resentful that my friends knew you were supporting me financially." She explained that her complaints about my behavior had been motivated by her own insecurity about accepting financial help rather than any legitimate problems with my character or actions. "I convinced myself that you were showing off or being controlling because it was easier than admitting that I was ashamed of needing help and grateful for it at the same time. I projected my own guilt onto you and convinced everyone else that you were the problem." Tyler had never returned to the picture, confirming my suspicion that his interest in Amanda had been largely financial. This painful lesson had taught Amanda valuable insights about relationships and the difference between people who care about you and people who care about what you can provide. The extended family members who had participated in the intervention meeting had also learned some uncomfortable truths about their own motivations. When Patricia had asked Susan and Mark for financial assistance during the crisis, they declined, claiming they couldn't afford to help. This had revealed the hypocrisy of relatives who were eager to provide advice about family financial dynamics, but unwilling to contribute actual financial support when needed. As we moved into the new year, my family had established much healthier relationship patterns based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. We'd started having regular family dinners again, but now everyone contributed to the meal preparation and expenses. We'd planned a family vacation for the summer, but this time it was a camping trip that everyone could afford equally. And my inclusion in the planning had never been questioned. Most importantly, we'd learned to have direct, honest conversations about problems instead of allowing resentment to build into destructive narratives. When Douglas felt uncomfortable about accepting a birthday gift I wanted to give him, he told me directly instead of complaining to other family members. When Amanda needed advice about her career plans, she asked for my input instead of assuming I would judge her choices. The financial boundaries we'd established were clear and sustainable. I occasionally helped with true emergencies, but only after family members had explored other options and only with clear agreements about repayment or circumstances. Nobody felt guilty about accepting help when it was genuinely needed, and nobody felt obligated to provide help that would create personal hardship. Looking back on those painful months, I realized that cutting off financial support had been the best thing I could have done for my family's emotional health and my own self-respect. It had forced everyone to confront unhealthy dependency patterns and develop genuine independence and mutual appreciation. My relationship with Sarah had shown me what healthy family relationships should look like. People who appreciate each other's strengths, support each other's goals, communicate directly about problems, and include everyone in important decisions and activities. The experience had taught me that true generosity isn't about giving until it hurts or enabling other people's poor financial decisions. True generosity involves helping people in ways that strengthen their independence and self-respect, rather than creating dependency and resentment. I'd also learned that family loyalty should be reciprocal. People who want the benefits of family relationships should be willing to provide the respect, inclusion, and emotional support that make those relationships meaningful. Most importantly, I discovered that my own well-being and happiness mattered just as much as everyone else's. Setting boundaries and protecting my emotional health wasn't selfish. It was necessary for building relationships based on genuine care, rather than obligation and guilt. The family meeting that had initially felt like an attack on my character had ultimately become the catalyst for creating the healthy, respectful family relationships I'd always wanted, but hadn't known how to achieve. As I sat in my apartment with Sarah planning our own European vacation for the following spring, I felt grateful for the painful lessons that had led to this much happier and more authentic way of living and loving. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took your generosity for granted? How did you handle the balance between wanting to help people you love and protecting your own emotional well-being? I'd love to hear your stories and thoughts about navigating complicated family dynamics in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more content about family relationships, personal boundaries, and finding the courage to prioritize your own happiness. Share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of reciprocal respect in family relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you find the strength to build the healthy, supportive relationships you deserve in your own life.